Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, guys. Before we start, many of you will know that there's been some devastating natural disasters that have been taking place. One in Maghreb, Morocco, and one in Libya. I've seen some of the scenes, some of the videos. Honestly, they're heart-wrenching, heartbreaking things to watch. I can't even watch them. That's how bad it is. But we have a responsibility upon us. I have a responsibility and you guys have a responsibility. What kind of people would we be if we just watch something like that and we have the capability? It would take us seconds, yes, seconds, to make a massive contribution to the victims of such disasters, and we decide not to. I will leave links in the description below. Please find it within your heart to not only give charity but to make dua for the victims of this natural disaster. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Let's start off with, and this is again with the permission of Patrick bin David. We're not going and having a meeting and then talking about private things that were discussed. We did start off as a private meeting between myself, yourself, and him, and another individual, Robert, there. And from there, we concluded at the end. We had some good things. It was a very great positive meeting. And he said, go ahead and discuss some of the things that we talked about with his permission. So where would you like to begin?
Well, I mean, let's begin with what happened exactly. So many people would have seen the video where me and Ali Dawa are basically talking about this negotiation that took place, and it was weeks and weeks long. These negotiations between us and Valuetainment, relating to a debate between us and some interlocutors about, in the first instance, about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So we agreed to such encounter and discussion, but then there was some problems, let's say, in the negotiations, in the boundary settings between us and the other party, and we felt like the kind of deal that we were getting was a raw one, and so we decided to move away from it altogether, because we thought that, for example, we had inequality in the numbers of people that were going to be representing Muslims comparative to the amount of Christians that were going to be there. If we include the host and the co-hosts and stuff like that, we had a topic which wasn't set and was yet to be set. There wasn't even a guarantee of equality of timing, which is standard in professional debates and stuff like that. And we kept asking some of these questions and we didn't get a satisfactory response. And so because we felt more and more frustrated by the whole experience, we decided to bring the matter to the public. And because of that and other things, we decided to speak to Patrick face to face about it on Zoom with you, of course, as a moderator. And I think that was your initiative, and you should be given credit for that. Yeah, alhamdulillah. I mean, because I think you see things that we don't see. Obviously, being in America, having spoken to him, having had private conversations with him, and to be honest with you, in that conversation, he came across as extremely facilitating. He came across extremely humble and generous, magnanimous. And so, if anyone shows us that level of energy, I think it's only right for us to respond in kind. And he was very concessionary, in fact, saying that all of those aspects that we've spoken about, the topic can include both Christianity and Islam. That there will be a co-host, and that you would be the co-host. So it would be, instead of Patrick Bet David being the only person to host it, it would be you and Patrick Bet David, which would kind of distribute the bias, if you like, and create more of an equal playing field, as it were. And critically as well, that we could actually use the footage for our own social media platforms, and so that we could potentially put it on our channels, which would increase obviously the reach, and would be better for everybody as well. And this would prevent any potential distortion that could happen, that in the potential debate, which we don't think that Patrick would go that far and do, to be honest, based on the conversations we've had with him and based on his track record. They wouldn't distort, especially considering the fact that he actually did, in the first instance, actually say that it was going to be live anyway. So that was a mitigation that we put in place in the first instance. But with all those things having been said, it sounded much more agreeable, frankly. And in fact, by the end of the conversation, we had a broader conversation about Muslim Christian interlocutors, where we suggested William Lane Craig and Ben Shapiro, and he has links to Ben Shapiro. He's just been on his show, and as many people will know, I've had many videos, refuting Ben Shapiro on his Palestine issue, on the Palestine issue, and so on. So that would be a massive, kind of debate, if you like, or discussion that could potentially happen along the line as well. So there's good to come out of this, but since we're still in the kind of negotiation stage and we're solidifying everything, and there's few things we have to take care of from our perspective in the United Kingdom, uh, we cannot update the public with an exact date and time as to when the engagement will take place and with whom and what the topic will be or whatever until all these things are set in stone. But the point to be noted here is the point to be noted here is that, quite frankly, he was facilitating, and it does seem like Patrick Bet-David and Valuetainment want to go more in the direction of building bridges with the Muslim community, tackling some of these issues. For example, the issues to do with transgender ideology and teaching LGBT curricula to children and things like that, which everyone, let's call it, I'm not going to say conservative because we're not conservative from a ideological perspective, but certainly we're traditionalists and we align more on those issues with US conservatives than we would do with liberals agree on. So that's really the gist of the meeting. It was a productive meeting, a fruitful one at that. And it's only fair, just as we came out in public, to reprimand and to criticize Patrick Bet-David, for us to come out and do the same thing when he's being so concessionary with us.
A lot of people, when you look at that's the honorable thing to do, and that's what we're called to do as Muslims. I mean, that's something that now, obviously, anyone who's extended, I've commended him actually, and I've seen his progression. He's come a long way from years ago. Some things that he said, and then we've also respectfully, presented the arguments academically. I've gone and we made some videos, and then you have also, and I think that things are starting to turn for the better.
Yeah.
I compared to like Joe Rogan. You remember me and you? I think we've
Together.
addressed some things to Joe
Yeah,
Rogan.
yeah.
Yeah, me and you, we've done some programs. And Joe Rogan, it looks like he really did a turn.
It's one of the most popular religions in the world, but it's a religion that embraces discipline. You go through Ramadan, you're not eating all day, you're not drinking any water all day. That belief system helps people.
Remember, he was having a lot of Islamophobes, and he was just really one-sided. But him also, he was been talking recently. You've done some videos on that. And we give credit where credit is due, because we're not trying to remain in some hostile environment. I mean, of course, we're going to call people out for their mistakes, their blunders. But we've tried to do it in a respectful manner, hoping that the door is open, that if the people want to come respectfully and sit with us, talk with us, not just talk about us, talk with us, and have a seat at the table. And I think this is going towards that path for the greater good, the greater picture.
Absolutely. Do you know, and the public may not know that there was a time where Joe Rogan was actually on his show, and he had a particular T-shirt on which had the word Redzovich on it. Is it Redzovich, right?
You remember? Yes, you remember
And
that?
I thought to myself, this looks unbelievable. Where's this familiar? And I realized, wait, Eddie Redzovich. So he had your surname.
That was my last name.
Yeah. Why did he? So tell me, why did he have your surname on his T-shirt?
I was just wondering. I said, "Look how Allah, God Almighty, these are like signs. Is it a sign for him? I don't know." He had literally, he had like that was for my school. He had my Redzovic jiu-jitsu
Yes.
T-shirt on his, and we pointed that out. We got some had some jiu-jitsu going.
Yeah.
We got some nutrition here.
But you're not the only one. I mean, well, I'm not the only fan of your jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I'm not the only fan of your jiu-jitsu because, I mean, we've got someone who's actually of note who is wearing your T-shirt. I mean, let's take a look at this.
Hey, that's our buddy. We were actually that's
Right.
Our friend Joe Rogan.
That's your T-shirt, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that is our T-shirt. Yeah,
That's your surname on that.
That's my
right?
surname. Yeah, that's my last name.
So
yeah.
because you made a video, right, with one of the mashayikh
Yeah.
before about Joe Rogan and some of the things that he said about Islam.
Yeah.
What do you think? This is a kind of peace offering, or what is this?
I don't know. I think, like I mentioned in the video we did.
Yeah.
We really wanted to reach out to Joe.
Yeah.
In a benign and nice, kind way.
That shows you something very important, which is that the work that you're doing at the Dean Show, and the work that's being done in terms of trying to kind of put our 2 cents, if you like, in the narrative, is having such an impact that someone like Joe Rogan, who's considered to be like the top podcaster, maybe in the United States, maybe one of the top leading ones in the English-speaking world, that he's actually putting your t-shirt on, I think is, to be honest, I think it's a sign of respect. I think he's done that because he's seen your videos. He's clearly seen our videos
Mm.
together, that what we've put forward, and he put that on to show, look, we're not against each other. I think he's done that as a sign of respect, and he also respects the fact that you're also a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner. People don't know, but I don't know how many stripes you've got now in black belt. Is it 5 stripes, 4 stripes, or
Four degree,
which
yes.
is
Alhamdulillah.
for those who don't know, that is, it takes years and years and years to achieve that. That is, that takes more than 10
Mashallah.
years to achieve for the average person, maybe 12, 13 years. And so he respects that because he's a black belt himself, and he sees a Muslim, and he sees many Muslims like yourself in the UFC and so on, coming on his coming on and speaking about his religion in a very respectful way, which shows you that your approach has reached the highest levels, Eddie, which is something you should be really proud of. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Alhamdulillah. May Allah, God Almighty, accept it from you, from me, from all of us, and continue to bless His work. And tell me, so you being now in a position where we've come a long way, having this emergency
Yeah.
meeting, and now some of these names that you mentioned, hopefully they'll put this together. Why is this important? Why is this, and how is this something? This is historic.
I think it is historic.
And you were mentioning like if you look down 50 years, you
Yeah.
said something brilliant, and people are not looking, ahead. If you want to look 50 years, repeat what you were saying. That's very
Look, I mean,
powerful.
nowadays, if you look at what teenagers study in secondary schools, they study the civil rights movement because there were some paradigm shifting cultural moments. They study what happened with African Americans, they study feminism, they study all these kind of things that happened in the 1960s in particular. Yes, there was legislative change, but there was also a grassroots movement which was important enough to be studied 50 to 60, 70 years later. I think what we're seeing with the cultural wars nowadays is significant enough to be a historical event. And I think that because of social media, we as the Muslims do have now a voice in that particular historical moment. And people are going to be studying this. I do believe that people could be studying this 50, 60 years from now. It's as historically significant as all those things that were happening at that time. Because quite frankly, it's even more watched, it's even more popular, pound for pound, than those things were at that time. The only thing that's not there is legislative change. But I think it's as historically significant as what's going on in the 1960s, and so people will be looking at figures like Joe Rogan and studying them, I think, 60 years from now. Potentially figures like Patrick Bet-David. And I said that to him. I said that people were looking at valuetainment, doing courseworks and studies and theses about what was said, what was their stance with Muslims, and what was their stance with Jews, and what was their stance with Christians, and so on and so forth. These things are very important now. It constitutes the legacy, the cultural legacy of the history, really, the sociological history of the United States of America and the West in general. And we have a place on the table, as you've mentioned and said, as the Muslims. So we have to be careful how we strategize so that we don't agree to everything and we don't disagree to everything. We bring ourselves a favorable result, which means that we need to be wise with these things. And I think having this emergency meeting with Patrick Bet-David was the wise thing to do. And his response was, in turn, the wise response. I think he's a very pragmatic person, and you can't be that successful in business as he is and have, an empire of valuetainment and whatever, unless you are pragmatic like that. And so I think the more we think about the collective interest, the more things are going to go right for everybody.
I like, and it made sense on both sides. This is why this meeting was so important. Having this meeting, now we can see like what the way you were presenting everything, and then he got into, is very transparent. He was showing his emails, how he gets things, the short amount of time, this, that, and the other, and he really not knowing on one end who this person, on the other, these Islamophobes, career Islamophobe, and then you also, now it's coming down to the time that you need to know like what's going on so you can better prepare you, so you can see things from both sides, and then at the end it just coming together, because these people that were lined up, I mean, these are career Islamophobes. These are
Absolutely.
people with blood on their hands. These are people who, now you had the Andrew Breivik, was it,
Anders
and
Anders
he's
Breivik,
mentioned in
yeah.
his Anders Breivik
Mm.
in his manifesto was mentioned these people. So this was very sensitive. Also, now that I mean, this is not a problem for you at the end. This is something that's your specialty, and you've dealt with people like this. But it was nice to see how he had presented things. You could see, where he was coming from, and then how everything just at the end, it came out to a positive ending. What were your thoughts about that?
Absolutely, and I think I mean the way he presented it was that he had no idea who these people were, and I have good reason to believe that, especially in the second person, who is Rashid Hamimi, he wouldn't know who he was because he's most of his content is in the Arabic language. So that unless you have access to that, fair play, you won't know who he is. But these people have had strong anti-Islamic sentiments, and they attack the Prophet of Islam. Not just that, not just the fact that they attack the Prophet of Islam and Muslim people, but they effectively try and make life harder for Muslim people in the West. I mean, some of the organizations and what they're dealing with, they are making things harder for Muslims in the West, and in a way, we can't really deal with that. And imagine having a podcast where the premise of it is to try and create bridges, and you bring people who frankly are trying to break all bridges. I mean, these people who have no interest in collaborating with Muslim people. uh, it was a bit kind of off key from that perspective, but I think the fact that we explained to him who these people were, he understood at least where we were coming from. Why would a Muslim in the first instance be angry that you've invited these two people, and then you've done these kind of things, and then certain particulars were not very clear. It just added to the frustration, but he was very understanding, and we appreciate that, and that's where it needs to be. He's a good negotiator, and I have to give him credit where credit is due.
And you see that at the same time, before that, he was talking about, he had Candace Owens on. You heard of Candace Owens. And every time I see many of these conservatives, Christians come on and they talk about, you would think she's talking to in a way that, for instance, she was talking about and this goes in under the umbrella of things that we have in common that we can talk about. And you invite us to the table to talk about these things, see the Muslim perspective. She was talking about the demonic culture now that's affecting the youth, the over sexualization of children. I'm sure you're like, man, we got a lot to say on this, right?
Mm.
The women of selling themselves, OnlyFans, Instagram, they're just out there, but they're just naked. And looking at the Kim Kardashian and others as role models, and how she was a part of that lifestyle, but she changed for the better. The feminism and the demasculation of men,
Mm-hmm.
the mother being looked down instead of like a home engineer, choosing. And she was actually asked on his program, what would you rather be, a career woman or a home engineer? They didn't say home engineer. I call it a home engineer, or a mother. And she said a mother. And then she talked about so many of these things that we're on board with. What would you say?
Absolutely, and that's what we should be looking for. We should be. I mean, the Quran instructs us effectively to look for common ground. I mean, the most common of grounds we should be looking at, obviously, is Tawheed, monotheism, from a theological perspective, and try and draw conclusions from that. Um, but these things are also things which are commonalities between Islam and, let's say, Christianity or traditional versions of it. And at the end of the day, I mean, there's work to be done here. I think that we have kind of neglected the conservative community in the West. We've neglected them in the Dawah in a way which isn't really, I think, justifiable. We need to look at them as individuals who can contribute, and we can contribute to them. Because I think that from a Dawah perspective, from a evangelizing perspective, we can bring a lot of them to our side. In fact, by just explaining to them that these are the ways that we live. A lot of people become Muslim just by looking at how we as Muslims live our lives. So I think there's a lot of work to be done.